The rain fell like tears from a pewter sky as Dante Carvello pulled his black Mercedes through the iron gates of Riverside Cemetery. Third Thursday of every month, same time, same ritual. The windshield wipers carved temporary clarity through the downpour, their rhythm matching the steady ache that had lived in his chest for the past 2 years since Sofia Carvello had drawn her final breath. He parked along the winding path, engine ticking as it cooled in the October chill. The cemetery stretched before him in elegant silence, marble angels and granite monuments emerging from the mist like guardians of secrets too heavy for the living to bear. This place cost more per square foot than most people's homes, but money meant nothing when it came to honoring the only person who had ever truly loved him. Dante stepped into the rain without bothering to retrieve his umbrella from the back seat. The cold water soaked through his charcoal wool coat, darkening the fabric across his broad shoulders. Let it rain. Let it pour. Nothing could make this monthly pilgrimage any more miserable than it already was. His Italian leather shoes clicked against the wet pavement as he walked the familiar path towards Section 7, where the Carvello family monument stood like a small cathedral among the other graves. 23 steps from the main path to his mother's resting place. He had counted them so many times the number was burned into his memory. But today, something was different. Today, someone else knelt beside his mother's headstone. Dante froze, his hand instinctively moving toward the weapon concealed beneath his coat. The figure was small, feminine, draped in a dark coat that blended with the stormy afternoon. Rain plastered her black hair to her skull as she bent forward, her forehead nearly touching the polished granite. She was crying, not the polite, restrained weeping of a distant acquaintance paying respects. This was raw grief, the kind that came from somewhere deep and broken. Her shoulders shook with the force of it, and even through the rain, Dante could see tears streaming down her face as she whispered words too soft for him to hear. For a moment, he wondered if he had stumbled into someone else's private tragedy. But no, this was definitely his mother's grave. He could see Sophia's name carved into the stone, along with the dates that marked her 58 years of life. Below that, the inscription he had chosen himself. Beloved mother, forever remembered. Who was this woman, and why was she mourning his mother with such devastating intensity? Dante approached slowly, his footsteps muffled by the rain-soaked grass. When he was close enough to see her clearly, his breath caught in his throat. She was beautiful in a way that seemed almost ethereal in the gray light, her dark skin luminous against the storm. High cheekbones, full lips, elegant neck. Even in her grief, there was something regal about her posture. She must have sensed his presence because she looked up suddenly, her eyes wide with surprise and something that looked almost like fear. They were the most extraordinary eyes he had ever seen, deep brown with flecks of gold, currently swimming with tears. I wonder where you are right now as you listen to this story. The voice in his head seemed to whisper as he stared at her. Are you somewhere warm and dry, safe from your own storms? Do you have a place where you go to remember the people who shaped you? The rain continued to fall between them as Dante struggled to find words. Excuse me, he said finally, his voice rougher than he intended. This is a private section. The woman scrambled to her feet, her hands shaking as she wiped tears from her cheeks. I am so sorry, she said, her voice carrying a slight accent he could not quite place. I did not mean to intrude. I was just... She gestured helplessly at the grave, unable or unwilling to finish the sentence. You were just what? Dante pressed, stepping closer despite himself. How do you know my mother? The woman's eyes widened further at his words, and for a moment, he thought she might run. Her gaze darted to his face, studying his features with an intensity that made him uncomfortable. When recognition dawned in her expression, it was followed immediately by something that looked like pain. You are Dante, she whispered, and it was not a question. The fact that this stranger knew his name sent ice through his veins that had nothing to do with the October rain. In his world, anonymity was survival. People who knew his name without introduction were either allies, enemies, or complications he could not afford. Who are you? He demanded, his voice dropping to the dangerous tone that had made grown men step back in fear. How do you know who I am, and what are you doing at my mother's grave? Instead of answering, the woman bent down and picked up something from the base of the headstone. White chrysanthemums, their petals bruised from the rain but still recognizable. Sophia's favorite flowers, the ones Dante brought every month without fail. She loved these, the woman said softly, cradling the flowers against her chest. She told me once that they reminded her of fresh snow, clean and pure and full of possibility. Dante's world tilted. No one outside the family knew about his mother's love for white chrysanthemums. It was a small, private detail from a woman who had lived most of her life in shadows. Yet this stranger spoke of Sophia as if she had known her personally, intimately even. "You could not have known my mother," he said, but doubt crept into his voice despite his certainty. "She did not associate with people like me," the woman finished, and there was no bitterness in her tone, only a sad understanding. "I know how this must look to you. I know you have no reason to believe me. But she was important to me. More important than you could possibly understand." The way she said his mother's name, with such tenderness and familiarity, made something twist in Dante's chest. This was impossible. Sophia had been careful, paranoid even, about the people she allowed into her life. The nature of Dante's business had demanded it. Yet this woman spoke of her as if they had shared secrets, as if they had meant something to each other. "I come here every month," the woman continued, her voice barely audible above the rain. "I bring her flowers and I tell her about the things I have seen, the people I have helped. I promised her I would never stop, and I have kept that promise for 2 years. 2 years. The same amount of time Sophia had been dead." "What kind of promise?" Dante asked, but the woman was already backing away from him, clutching the white chrysanthemums to her chest like a shield. "I should not have let you see me," she said, shaking her head. "I was supposed to be more careful. She would not want me to bring danger to your door." "Danger? What are you talking about?" But the woman turned and began walking quickly toward the main path, her dark coat billowing behind her in the wind. Dante started after her, his longer strides easily closing the distance, but she spoke without turning around. "Your mother was a good woman, Dante. Better than this world deserved. She saved lives that no one else bothered to save, helped people that no one else bothered to help. I was one of them." She reached the main path and paused, finally turning to face him again. In the gray light, she looked almost ghost-like, as if she might disappear entirely if he blinked. "I will not stop visiting her," she said with quiet determination. "This is the only place I can still feel close to her, the only place I can still keep my promise. But I will be more careful. You will not see me again." "Wait," Dante called, but she was already moving toward a small silver sedan parked near the cemetery entrance. He could have caught her easily, could have forced her to stay and answer his questions. In his world, people did not walk away from Dante Carvello without his permission. But something in her voice, some note of genuine grief and respect for his mother, made him hesitate just long enough for her to reach her car and drive away into the storm. Dante stood in the rain for a long time after her taillights disappeared, staring at his mother's grave and trying to make sense of what had just happened. The white chrysanthemums she had been holding were scattered on the ground where she had dropped them, their petals mixing with the rain and fallen leaves. He picked them up carefully, arranging them in the small vase built into the base of the headstone. They were fresh, expensive, the kind that came from a high-end florist rather than a grocery store. Someone had spent money on these flowers, had chosen them with care, and brought them here with purpose. As he knelt where the mysterious woman had knelt, Dante noticed something else. The earth around his mother's grave was soft, recently disturbed, not by cemetery maintenance, but by careful hands that had been digging small holes, planting something. He looked closer and saw them. Tiny white flower bulbs, professionally planted in neat rows around the perimeter of the grave site. Someone had been here regularly, not just to visit, but to beautify, to tend, to care. The rain continued to fall as Dante tried to process this impossible revelation. His mother had been dead for 2 years, and in all that time, he had believed himself to be the only person who mourned her. The only person who remembered her birthday, who brought her flowers, who spoke to her headstone as if she could still hear. But this woman, this beautiful stranger who knew Sophia's favorite flowers and spoke of promises and saved lives, had been coming here all along, had been caring for his mother's grave with the devotion of a daughter, the love of family. What promise had she made? What had his mother done for her that inspired such loyalty, such dedication? And why had Sophia never mentioned her to Dante? As he finally stood to leave, Dante made a promise of his own. He would find this woman again. He would learn her name, her story, her connection to his mother. The questions burning in his chest demanded answers, and Dante Carvello was not a man who left questions unanswered. The mysterious mourner had said he would not see her again, that she would be more careful. But she had also said she would never stop visiting, never stop keeping her promise to Sophia, which meant she would be back. And when she returned, Dante would be waiting. The security footage from Riverside Cemetery was grainy, but clear enough. Dante watched the digital recording for the 15th time, studying every detail of the woman who had vanished into the storm 3 days ago. She moved with purpose, not the wandering gait of someone visiting randomly. Her path was direct, practiced, as if she had walked it many times before. Marcus Chun, his head of security, leaned back in his leather chair and rubbed tired eyes. "Boss, I ran her license plate through every database we have access to. Alizia Romano, 28 years old, registered address in Koreatown. No criminal record, no outstanding warrants. Works as a freelance translator, pays her taxes on time, lives alone." Freelance translator. That explained the slight accent Dante had detected in her voice, though it did not explain why a translator would be mourning his mother with such devastating grief. He fast-forwarded through the footage again, watching Alizia kneel beside Sophia's grave with the reverence of a devoted daughter. "What else?" he asked without looking away from the screen. Credit card records show she buys flowers from Petals and Thorns on Wilshire Boulevard every month for the past 2 years. Always white chrysanthemums. Always the same day you visit the cemetery. Always the day before. The day before. Which meant she had been tracking his schedule, timing her visits to avoid encountering him. Until 3 days ago, when the rain had delayed him and shattered her careful planning. Marcus cleared his throat. "There is something else, boss. Something strange." Dante finally looked up from the screen. "Strange how?" The credit card also shows regular payments to St. Catherine's Shelter downtown. $500 every month, same date as the flower purchases. Been going on for 2 years. St. Catherine's. Dante knew the place, a refuge for women fleeing dangerous situations. His mother had volunteered there occasionally, though she had always been secretive about her charitable activities. Too dangerous for the wife of a crime boss to be seen helping people who might have connections to rival families. But why would a translator be sending money to a women's shelter every month? Unless she was not just a donor, but someone who understood the need for such places from personal experience. "Keep digging," Dante ordered. "I want to know everything about Alizia Romano. Where she was born, where she went to school, who her friends are, what she eats for breakfast. Everything." While Marcus worked his contacts and databases, Dante found himself thinking about the woman at unexpected moments. The way she had cradled those chrysanthemums against her chest, as if they were precious. The genuine anguish in her voice when she spoke of promises and saved lives. The careful way she had planted bulbs around his mother's grave, tending it like a sacred space. 2 mornings later, as Dante reviewed security reports from his various businesses, something caught his attention. A police report from 3 weeks ago, buried in the routine intelligence briefings his people compiled daily. Anonymous tip had prevented an assassination attempt on a local crime boss. Caller had provided specific details about time, location, and method that proved accurate when police investigated. The target had been Vincent Torino, one of Dante's biggest rivals. Under normal circumstances, Dante would have celebrated Torino's misfortune. But something about the timing nagged at him. He pulled up his calendar and felt ice form in his stomach. 3 weeks ago was the day he had been scheduled to meet with Torino about territorial disputes. The meeting that had been mysteriously canceled at the last minute when Torino was arrested based on the anonymous tip. If the assassination had proceeded as planned, Dante would have been there. Would have been in the crossfire. He grabbed his phone and called Marcus. Pull the police reports for every major incident in the past 2 years. Look for anonymous tips, mysterious cancellations, anything that might have prevented violence in my vicinity. It took Marcus 6 hours to compile the data, and when he presented his findings, Dante felt the world shift beneath his feet. 17 separate incidents over 24 months. Anonymous warnings that prevented drug deals from turning violent. Tips that led to arrests of contract killers. mysterious equipment failures that shut down bombing attempts. All of them connected, somehow, to situations where Dante might have been collateral damage. Someone had been watching him, protecting him, saving his life over and over again without his knowledge. "Boss," Marcus said quietly, "whoever your guardian angel is, they have access to information that should be impossible to get. Police communications, private meeting schedules, criminal network intelligence. This is not amateur hour." Dante stared at the timeline Marcus had created, 17 red dots marking 17 times he should have been dead. 17 times someone had intervened from the shadows to keep him breathing. Someone who visited his mother's grave every month and spoke of promises. The realization hit him like a physical blow. Alizia Romano was not just mourning his mother. She was honoring a commitment Sophia had somehow extracted from her, a promise that extended beyond death to encompass the protection of Sophia's son. But how was a freelance translator with no criminal connections managing to infiltrate police communications and criminal networks? What skills was she hiding behind that quiet, grief-stricken exterior? Dante made his decision. That afternoon, he drove to Riverside Cemetery and parked in his usual spot. But instead of walking directly to his mother's grave, he found a bench with a clear view of Section 7 and settled in to wait. The October air was crisp and clean, unmarked by rain for the first time in a week. She came at sunset, just as the cemetery staff were preparing to close the gates. Dante watched her park the same silver sedan and walk the familiar path with practiced ease. She carried fresh white chrysanthemums and a small gardening tool, moving with the quiet confidence of someone who belonged. From his hidden vantage point, he could see her kneeling beside Sophia's headstone and speaking in low, urgent tones. Even at a distance, he could tell she was agitated about something. Her movements were sharper, more anxious than the serene grief he had witnessed during their first encounter. After placing the fresh flowers, she began working on the planted bulbs, checking their progress with the care of a devoted gardener. But every few minutes, she would pause and scan the surrounding area, her head turning in sharp, controlled movements that reminded Dante of a soldier checking for threats. Professional awareness. Combat training. This was not the behavior of a civilian translator. When she finished her gardening, Alizia sat back on her heels and began speaking to the headstone again. This time, Dante crept closer, using the larger monuments for cover until he could make out her words. "I think he suspects, Sophia," she was saying, her voice tight with worry. "He was asking questions, investigating. I knew I should have been more careful, but seeing him there in the rain, looking so lost and alone, I almost told him everything." She paused, as if listening for a response from the marble angel that watched over Sophia's grave. "I know you made me promise to stay hidden, to keep him safe without revealing myself. But it is getting harder. There are new threats forming, and I cannot protect him effectively from the shadows much longer. He needs to know what he is facing. New threats." Dante's blood chilled as he processed her words. "The Kozlov family is moving against him," she continued, her voice dropping even lower. "They blame him for the weapons shipment that was intercepted last month. They do not know it was me who tipped off the authorities, and they are planning retaliation for next week." Next week, Dante had a major business meeting scheduled with several family heads, a gathering that would put him in the same room as multiple potential enemies. If the Kozlovs were planning something. "I cannot stop this one without revealing myself," Alizia whispered to the headstone. "And if I reveal myself, if he knows I exist, then I can no longer be his guardian angel. The moment he acknowledges me, everything changes." Dante understood then why she had seemed so panicked when he confronted her. It was not just about maintaining privacy. Her ability to protect him depended on remaining invisible, on being a ghost who could move through criminal networks without being connected to him. But she was right about the Kozlovs. He knew Viktor Kozlov well enough to recognize the man's capacity for brutality. If they were planning retaliation, it would be swift, violent, and designed to send a message to anyone else considering interference with their operations. As Alizia rose to leave, Dante made his choice. He stepped out from behind the monument and called her name. "Alizia Romano." She spun around, her hand moving instinctively toward her coat in a motion that confirmed his suspicions about hidden weapons. When she saw him, her face went through a series of emotions. Surprise, fear, resignation, and something that looked almost like relief. "You should not be here," she said quietly. "Neither should you," he replied, walking closer. "But here we are." She looked around the cemetery, calculating escape routes with the efficiency of someone trained in tactical thinking. But she did not run. Instead, she straightened her shoulders and faced him with the dignity he remembered from their first meeting. "How much did you hear?" "Enough to know that you have been saving my life for 2 years. Enough to know that someone named Kozlov wants me dead, and you cannot stop them without breaking your promise to my mother." Alizia closed her eyes and took a deep breath. When she opened them again, the mask of careful distance was gone, replaced by naked honesty. "Sophia saved my life when I was 15 years old," she said. "I was nobody, nothing, just another girl who would have disappeared into the darkness if not for her kindness. She gave me a future, an education, a chance to become someone who could help others the way she helped me. And in return? In return, I promised to watch over the thing she loved most in this world. You." The simple honesty of it hit him harder than any elaborate explanation could have. This woman, this mysterious guardian who had been keeping death at bay for 24 months, was motivated by nothing more complicated than gratitude and love for a woman who had shown her mercy. "The question is," Dante said carefully, "what happens now that I know?" The answer to his question hung in the cold cemetery air like morning fog, heavy with possibility and consequence. Alizia stood among the marble angels and granite monuments, her dark coat whipping in the October wind, and for the first time in 2 years, she looked directly into the eyes of the man she had sworn to protect. "Now that you know," she said quietly, "everything changes. I can no longer be invisible. I can no longer move through the shadows without someone connecting me to you. My usefulness as your guardian ends the moment this conversation is over." "Then maybe it is time for a different kind of protection," Dante replied, surprising himself with the words. "Maybe it is time I understood what my mother saw in you that made her extract such a promise." Alizia shook her head, pain flickering across her features. "You do not understand what you are asking. The story of how Sophia and I met, what she did for me, it is not a pretty tale. It involves parts of your mother's life that she kept hidden from you for good reason. Try me." For a long moment, Alizia studied his face, searching for something she seemed afraid she would not find. Finally, she sighed and gestured toward a stone bench beneath an old oak tree. "Then sit," she said, "because this is not a story that should be told standing." They sat with careful distance between them, close enough to speak quietly, but far enough apart to maintain the illusion of safety. Alizia pulled her coat tighter around herself and stared at Sophia's headstone as she began. "I was 15 when I met your mother. 15, alone, and running from men who had bought me like livestock. I had escaped from a trafficking house in downtown Los Angeles, but I had nowhere to go, no one to help me. I was living in an abandoned building, stealing food to survive, when Sophia found me." The words hit Dante like physical blows. He had known his mother volunteered at shelters, but he had never imagined she was actively involved in rescuing trafficking victims. That kind of work was dangerous, the kind of dangerous that could have gotten her killed if the wrong people discovered her activities. "She was at St. Catherine's shelter that night," Alizia continued, her voice soft with memory. "I had tried to steal food from their kitchen, and when the night security guard caught me, I was certain I was going to be turned over to the police. Instead, Sophia appeared. She took one look at me, this filthy, terrified girl who could barely speak English, and she knew exactly what I was running from. How could she know? Because she had been helping girls like me for years. Girls who had fallen through the cracks, who had been discarded by systems that were supposed to protect them. Your mother had a network of safe houses, a web of people who helped trafficked women disappear and start new lives." Dante felt the world tilt again. This painted a picture of Sofia Carvello that he had never seen, a woman who had been conducting dangerous rescue operations while married to a crime boss, while raising a son who was being groomed to inherit violence. "She brought me to a safe house that night," Alizia said, her eyes bright with unshed tears. "Fed me, gave me clean clothes, sat with me while I cried, and told her things I had never spoken aloud to anyone. And when I was finished, when I had emptied myself of all the horror and pain, she made me a promise." "What kind of promise?" "That I would never have to run again. That she would help me build a life worth living. give me tools to protect myself and others. She arranged for me to get proper identification, enrolled me in school, made sure I had a place to live where no one would ever find me. The generosity of it staggered him. His mother had essentially adopted this girl, given her everything needed for a new beginning, and she had done it without ever mentioning it to her own son. But that was not all she did, Alesia continued. She trained me. Trained you how? Everything. Self-defense, weapons, surveillance, how to read people and situations, how to move through the world without being seen when necessary. She said that knowledge was power, and power was the only real protection in a world that preyed on the vulnerable. This explained the professional awareness Dante had noticed, the way Alesia moved and scanned her environment with military precision. Sophia had not just rescued a trafficking victim. She had created a warrior. For 3 years, I lived in that safe house and learned everything your mother could teach me. She became more than my rescuer. She became my family, my teacher, my guide. The mother I had lost when I was sold at 13. The timeline was starting to make sense. 3 years of training, of building trust and connection, of Sophia slowly revealing the full scope of her secret work. And then, at some point, that work had come to an end. What happened after 3 years? Your mother got sick. The words were simple, but they carried the weight of devastating loss. Dante remembered those final months, watching cancer eat away at the strongest woman he had ever known, watching her fade despite the best medical care money could buy. She knew she was dying, Alesia whispered. She knew her time was running out, and she was terrified of what would happen to the people she protected when she was gone. Not just the women in her network, but you. Me? I never needed her protection. Alesia turned to look at him directly, and the sadness in her eyes was profound. Dante, you were her world. Everything she did, every risk she took, every secret she kept, it was all to build a better world for you to inherit. But she also knew that your father's business would never let you go, that there would always be people trying to hurt you to get to power and money. So she made another promise. To you. Not to me. For me. She made me swear that when she was gone, I would become your guardian angel. That I would watch over you the way she had watched over so many others. That I would keep you safe without you ever knowing I existed. Dante felt something break open in his chest, a complicated tangle of grief and gratitude and overwhelming emotion. His mother, even facing death, had been thinking about his safety, had been arranging protection for him that would extend beyond her grave. The night she died, Alesia continued, her voice barely audible, I was with her. The hospice nurses thought I was her niece, and you were taking a break to handle business calls. She was so weak she could barely whisper, but she made me repeat the promise 3 times. Made me swear on everything I held sacred that I would keep you breathing, no matter what. The image hit him with devastating clarity. His strong, fierce mother, reduced to whispers and fading strength, using her final moments to secure protection for him. The love required for such foresight, such sacrifice, left him struggling to breathe. She gave me something that night, Alesia said, reaching into her coat and pulling out a small object wrapped in velvet. She said it would help me find you when you needed help, help me understand your world well enough to navigate it. She unwrapped a delicate silver locket, the kind women wore in old photographs. Dante recognized it immediately. It had belonged to his grandmother, passed down through generations of Carvello women, and Sophia had worn it every day until the cancer treatments made jewelry uncomfortable. Open it, Alesia said, offering him the locket. Inside, where he expected to find a photograph, was a folded piece of paper covered in his mother's careful handwriting. Names, addresses, phone numbers. A comprehensive list of contacts within police departments, rival crime families, government agencies. His mother's intelligence network, the web of information that had allowed her to stay one step ahead of danger for decades. She spent months preparing this for me, Alesia explained, teaching me how to use these contacts, how to gather information, how to predict threats before they materialized. She turned me into your personal early warning system. Dante stared at the list, recognizing names he knew were impossible for an outsider to have. Police commissioners, federal agents, high-ranking members of families that had been enemies for generations. His mother had somehow cultivated relationships across every level of power in the criminal world, and she had passed that network to Alesia like an inheritance. For 2 years, I have used these contacts to keep you alive, Elysia said softly. Every anonymous tip, every mysterious cancellation, every lucky break that saved your life. I was following your mother's instructions, honoring her memory by protecting the thing she loved most. The magnitude of it overwhelmed him. For 24 months, while he had believed himself to be grieving alone, Elysia had been carrying out Sophia's final mission with the dedication of a sacred duty. She had sacrificed her own freedom, her own safety, to honor a promise made to a dying woman. Why didn't she tell me? He asked, his voice rough with emotion. Why keep this secret from her own son? Because she knew you would never have allowed it. You would have insisted on protecting me instead of letting me protect you. And because she understood that sometimes the most powerful protection comes from sources your enemies never see coming. A freelance translator with no apparent connections to the criminal world. The perfect cover for an intelligence operative. I never wanted you to know, Elysia continued. I was content to remain invisible, to honor Sophia's memory by keeping you safe from the shadows. But the threats are evolving, becoming more sophisticated. The Kozlov situation is just the beginning. There are larger forces moving against you, and I cannot stop them all alone. Then don't be alone. The words surprised them both. Dante had spoken without thinking, responding to some instinct deeper than strategy or caution. But as soon as the offer was made, he knew it was right. Your mother gave you to me as a guardian, he said, turning to face her fully. Now I am giving you something in return. Partnership. Protection. The resources to do this job properly instead of hiding in shadows. Elysia stared at him, hope and fear warring in her expression. That would mean revealing everything to your organization. It would mean trusting people with my life, with the network your mother built. It would mean trusting me, Dante corrected, the way my mother trusted you. For a long moment, they sat in silence among the cemetery monuments, the weight of 2 years of secrets settling between them. When Elysia finally spoke, her voice was steady with decision. Then we honor her memory together. We build on what she started, protect what she loved, and make sure her sacrifice meant something. Dante nodded, feeling something shift inside his chest. Not just the relief of finally understanding his mysterious protector, but the beginning of something deeper. Gratitude was transforming into respect. Respect was becoming admiration. And beneath it all, a growing awareness that this remarkable woman represented more than just his mother's final gift. She represented possibility. The restaurant Dante chose for their meeting was tucked into a quiet corner of Little Italy, the kind of place where conversations could happen without interruption and privacy was guaranteed by reputation rather than technology. Elysia arrived first, choosing a table with clear sightlines to all entrances, her back to the wall in a position that would have made Sophia proud. When Dante entered 20 minutes later, she watched him scan the room with the same professional assessment she had just completed. Two predators recognizing each other's instincts, she thought. The dynamic between them had already begun to shift. You are going to tell me about every single intervention, he said without preamble as he settled into the chair across from her. Every tip, every warning, every time you kept me breathing. I want to understand exactly how much I owe you. Elysia shook her head, uncomfortable with the direction of his thoughts. You do not owe me anything. I was honoring a promise to your mother. But Dante was already pulling out a leather portfolio, opening it to reveal printed pages covered with dates and incident reports. His research from the past week, she realized. He had been thorough. January 15th, last year, he began, reading from the top page. Anonymous tip prevented bombing of the Meridian Hotel during my meeting with the Torres family. That was you. It was a small thing. I happened to overhear conversation about timing and location. Small thing? Dante looked up from the papers, his dark eyes intense. 6 people died in the explosion. They set off at the backup location instead. If I had been there, the body count would have been 7. The weight of that truth settled between them. Elysia had known about the substitute target, had wrestled with whether to warn them too, but preserving her cover and protecting Dante had taken priority. The guilt of those deaths still haunted her dreams. March 3rd, Dante continued. My car suffered mysterious brake failure 15 minutes before I was supposed to drive to a meeting in the warehouse district. The meeting where Alexei Volkov was shot by a sniper who had positioned himself exactly where my car would have been parked. I may have tampered with your brake lines, Elysia admitted quietly. It seemed preferable to letting you drive into an ambush. You could have been caught if my security team had investigated the mechanical failure more thoroughly. But they did not, because you were already annoyed about missing the meeting and wanted the car fixed quickly rather than examined forensically. Dante stared at her, and she could see him recalculating everything he thought he knew about her capabilities. Tampering with a luxury vehicle's brake system without being detected required technical knowledge far beyond what a translator should possess. What other skills did my mother teach you? He asked. Everything she thought I might need to survive in your world. Weapons, electronics, surveillance, infiltration. How to disappear when necessary. How to become invisible in plain sight. How to kill efficiently if no other option remained. The last part made him pause. Have you ever had to use that particular skill? Once. A man who was going to plant a bomb in your office building discovered my surveillance and tried to eliminate the witness. I eliminated the threat instead. She had killed to protect him, and he had never even known she existed. The realization hit Dante with a force that left him struggling to process the enormity of her sacrifice. This woman had been living a ghost's existence for 2 years, putting herself in mortal danger repeatedly, all to honor a promise to his dying mother. Show me, he said suddenly. Show you what? How you do it. How you watch me without being seen. How you gather intelligence. How you move through my world like a phantom. I want to understand. Elysia hesitated, then pulled out her phone and opened a photography app. The screen filled with images that made Dante's blood run cold. Pictures of him entering buildings, meeting with associates, walking to his car. Hundreds of photographs taken from impossible angles with telephoto precision. You have been stalking me for 2 years. I have been protecting you for 2 years, she corrected. There is a difference. She swiped to another folder, this one filled with photographs of other people. Men Dante recognized as enemies, rivals, potential threats. But these images were different, taken in dark alleys and private spaces, showing meetings and exchanges that were supposed to be secret. How did you get access to Kozlov's private warehouse? Dante asked, staring at a photograph that showed Viktor Kozlov accepting a briefcase from a man Dante did not recognize. I have been developing assets within rival organizations. People who provide information in exchange for certain considerations. What kind of considerations? The kind your mother would have approved of. Help getting abused women away from dangerous men. Anonymous tips that prevent violence against innocent people. Information that allows good cops to arrest bad criminals. She had built her own network, Dante realized. Using Sophia's contacts as a foundation, she had created a web of informants motivated by conscience rather than money. It was elegant, effective, and completely different from the fear-based intelligence networks most criminal organizations relied on. The waiter approached their table, and their conversation shifted seamlessly to safer topics. To anyone watching, they looked like two people enjoying dinner together, perhaps colleagues or friends catching up over pasta and wine. But beneath the surface, Dante was studying this woman who had reorganized her entire existence around keeping him alive. She was beautiful in the warm restaurant lighting, her dark skin luminous against the deep blue sweater she wore. When she smiled at something he said about his mother's cooking, laugh lines appeared at the corners of her eyes, transforming her face from merely striking to genuinely radiant. Tell me about her garden, Elysia said as their main courses arrived. Sophia mentioned that you used to help her plant vegetables when you were young. The request surprised him. Most people wanted to hear about his business dealings, his power, his connections. No one ever asked about childhood memories of dirt under his fingernails and his mother's patient instructions about soil and sunlight. She had tomatoes that were better than anything you could buy in stores, he found himself saying. Huge beefsteaks that she would slice thick for sandwiches. And herbs everywhere. Basil, oregano, rosemary. The whole backyard smelled like Italy in summer. Elysia listened with the focused attention of someone memorizing every detail, and Dante realized she was collecting these stories to preserve them. His mother's memory lived not just in his heart, but in this woman's dedication to keeping Sophia's world alive through conversation and shared remembrance. She told me you refused to eat vegetables from anywhere else, Elysia said, smiling at the memory. Said you would rather go hungry than accept inferior tomatoes. I was a spoiled child with strong opinions about food quality. You were loved, Elysia corrected gently. There is a difference. The simple observation hit him unexpectedly hard. Yes, he had been loved. Completely, unconditionally, by a woman who had hidden the full extent of her goodness from him to protect both him and the people she helped. As they shared dessert and stories, Dante found himself drawn deeper into conversation with this remarkable woman who knew his mother's secrets and had built her life around honoring them. When Elysia laughed at his impression of his mother's reaction to his first arrest, the sound was warm and genuine, transforming the careful distance she usually maintained. Their hands brushed as they both reached for the wine bottle, and neither pulled away immediately. The contact was electric, sending heat up Dante's arm that had nothing to do with the alcohol and everything to do with growing awareness that his feelings for Elysia were evolving beyond gratitude. She must have felt it too, because her breath caught slightly and her eyes widened before she carefully withdrew her hand and redirected attention to her dessert plate. The interruption came as Dante was leaning closer, drawn by the subtle scent of her perfume and the way candlelight flickered across her collarbones. His phone buzzed with the sharp insistence that meant emergency, and the spell was broken. Marcus Chin's voice was tight with urgency. "Boss, we have a situation. 3 of our dock supervisors were found dead an hour ago, and there are federal agents swarming the waterfront. Someone leaked information about tonight's shipment." Dante met Elysia's eyes across the table and saw that she had heard every word. Her expression had already shifted back to professional alertness. The warm woman replaced by the strategic guardian who had kept him alive for 2 years. "I have to go," he said, signaling for the check. "I know," she replied, but her voice carried a note of disappointment that matched his own. Outside the restaurant, as they waited for their respective cars, Dante struggled with the sudden shift from intimate dinner to crisis management. The evening had been a revelation, showing him facets of Elysia that went far beyond her skills as a protector. She was intelligent, funny, compassionate, and when she let her guard down, absolutely captivating. But she was also right that everything had changed now that he knew about her. The enemies who had failed to kill him for 2 years would eventually realize someone was providing protection, and when they did, Elysia would become a target herself. "You should disappear for a while," he said as his driver pulled up to the curb, "until I can figure out who leaked information about the shipment and how much our security has been compromised." Elysia shook her head firmly. "The moment you face increased danger is the moment I need to be closer, not farther away. That was your mother's instruction, and it was good advice. My mother never anticipated that I might want to protect the person who was protecting me." She studied his face in the streetlight, searching for something he hoped she would find. When she spoke, her voice was soft but determined. "Your mother understood exactly what might happen between us, Dante. She warned me that caring for you might become more than duty, that watching over you might turn into something deeper. She made me promise that if that day ever came, I would choose your safety over my own feelings." "And what do you choose?" Before she could answer, a black sedan pulled up behind Dante's car, and Marcus Chin stepped out with 2 additional security men. The moment for personal revelation had passed, consumed by the demands of a world that never paused for romance or possibility. "Be careful tonight," Elysia said as he moved toward his waiting team. "There are more threats moving than just the federal investigation." "How do you know?" "Because I have been monitoring communication channels all day, and someone has been asking questions about you and the woman you had dinner with tonight." The words hit him like ice water. Already, their single public appearance together had attracted attention from people who made it their business to catalog his associations and vulnerabilities. "Go home," he said urgently. "Stay there until I contact you." But Elysia was already shaking her head as her own car arrived. "I will be watching," she said firmly. "You will not face whatever is coming alone." As their cars pulled away in opposite directions, Dante realized that protecting Elysia was going to be far more complicated than he had anticipated. She had spent 2 years learning to be invisible while keeping him safe. Now he had to figure out how to keep them both alive while learning to be visible together. The federal investigation at the docks had been a setup, Dante realized as he reviewed the surveillance footage with Marcus Chin. Too clean, too coordinated, too perfectly timed to catch his organization off guard. Someone had orchestrated the leaks specifically to create chaos and draw his attention away from other vulnerabilities. "Boss," Marcus said, pointing to a timestamp on the screen. This is when it gets interesting. 3 hours before the federal raid, cameras picked up unusual activity around the cemetery. The footage showed 2 black SUVs parked near Riverside Cemetery's main entrance, their occupants using telephoto lenses to photograph visitors. When the timestamp reached Elysia's usual visiting time, Dante watched with growing dread as the surveillance team focused their attention on her silver sedan. They have been watching her, he said, ice forming in his stomach. For at least a week, based on what we found. Viktor Kozlov's people have been building a profile, documenting her schedule, mapping her movements. They know she visits your mother's grave every month, and they know you met with her twice in the past 10 days. The implications were devastating. Elysia's greatest protection had been her invisibility, her ability to move through criminal networks without being connected to him. That protection was now completely compromised, and she had become a target specifically because of her association with Dante. Where is she now? He asked. Home, according to the GPS tracker on her car. But boss, there is something else. We intercepted communication suggesting they are planning to move against her tonight. Tonight was Thursday, Elysia's regular cemetery visit. Dante was already reaching for his coat and weapons before Marcus finished speaking. Get every available man to Riverside Cemetery immediately, and send a team to her apartment building for backup security. What if this is a diversion? Marcus asked. What if they want you focused on protecting her while they hit one of our other operations? Then they get what they want, Dante replied without hesitation. Because she is not expendable. The drive to the cemetery took 12 minutes through evening traffic, 12 minutes during which Dante called Elysia's phone repeatedly without response. By the time he reached the iron gates, his security team was already in position, but the silver sedan was nowhere to be seen. She is not here yet, Marcus reported through his earpiece. Cemetery staff confirms no one matching her description has entered in the past hour. Dante checked his watch. She was late, which meant either something had delayed her or something had happened to her. Neither option provided comfort. Boss, Marcus's voice carried new urgency. We have movement. Black SUV approaching from the south entrance, 2 vehicles total. This looks like the surveillance team from the footage. They were here, which meant Elysia was coming. The Kozlovs had anticipated her schedule and positioned themselves for an ambush at the one location they knew she would visit. Dante made his decision. Move in and neutralize them before she arrives. But even as his team moved toward the south entrance, Elysia's silver sedan appeared at the main gate. She was early, approaching from an unexpected direction, and suddenly the careful positioning of Dante's security team was completely wrong for protecting her. Contact, Marcus reported tersely. Multiple armed men moving toward the silver sedan. Dante was already running through the cemetery, drawing his weapon as he sprinted between marble monuments toward the sound of gunfire. When he reached Section 7, the scene was chaos. Elysia's car sat empty with both doors open, bullet holes spiderwebbing the rear window. She was nowhere to be seen, but muzzle flashes from behind his mother's monument indicated she had found cover and was returning fire. 3 attackers were advancing on her position, while 2 more flanked from the east. Professional formation, coordinated movement. This was not a simple kidnapping attempt. This was a military-style operation designed to capture her alive. Dante dropped the nearest attacker with 2 shots center mass, drawing immediate attention from the rest of the assault team. The tactical advantage shifted as his security team arrived and established overlapping fields of fire, but Elysia was still pinned down behind inadequate cover. Movement to your left, he called to her, and watched as she rolled away from incoming gunfire with fluid grace that confirmed every suspicion he had harbored about her combat training. When she rose to return fire, he saw blood on her jacket sleeve and felt rage explode through his chest with volcanic intensity. They had hurt her. They had dared to injure the woman his mother had entrusted to his care, the guardian who had spent 2 years keeping him alive. The firefight lasted 4 minutes and ended with 5 dead attackers and Elysia sitting on the ground beside Sophia's headstone, pressing a torn piece of her shirt against the bullet graze on her left arm. How bad? Dante asked, kneeling beside her to examine the wound. Through and through, shallow angle. I have had worse paper cuts, she replied, but her hands were shaking slightly from adrenaline crash. You should not have come alone, he said, anger and relief making his voice rougher than he intended. You knew they were watching you, knew this could happen. I came early and used a different route specifically because I suspected surveillance. Elysia replied with equal heat. If your team had been positioned correctly, none of this would have happened. They stared at each other in the aftermath of violence, both breathing hard, both alive despite the odds, both furious for different reasons. The professional distance they had maintained was crumbling under the weight of shared danger and mutual protection. Marcus approached cautiously, reading the tension between them accurately. Boss, we need to move. Police response time means we have maybe 3 minutes before this place is crawling with investigators. Safe house, Dante decided. The one in Malibu. Full security detail, no outside contact until we understand the scope of the threat. I am not going into hiding, Elysia protested, struggling to stand despite her injury. There are other people depending on the protection network your mother built. If I disappear, women who are counting on safe passage will be left vulnerable. The network can function without you for a few days while we eliminate the immediate threat to your life. No, it cannot. Tomorrow night, 3 women are being moved out of trafficking situations. Next week, 2 more are scheduled for extraction from abusive relationships. If I am not available to coordinate those operations, people die. The fierce determination in her voice reminded Dante painfully of his mother. Sophia had possessed the same unwillingness to prioritize personal safety over protecting vulnerable people, the same stubborn commitment to a mission larger than herself. Then we protect them and you simultaneously, he said, making a decision that would reshape his entire organization's priorities. We expand operations to cover your mother's network until the threat is neutralized. That would mean revealing everything to your people, exposing the safe houses and contacts your mother spent decades developing. It would mean trusting my people with something important, the way my mother trusted you. Elysia studied his face in the fading daylight, searching for certainty in a situation that offered none. Finally, she nodded, accepting both his protection and the risk that came with it. The Malibu safe house was a sprawling contemporary structure built into coastal cliffs, isolated enough for security and comfortable enough for extended stays. As Dante's team swept the perimeter and established defensive positions, a private doctor arrived to treat Elysia's wound properly. She sat on the living room sofa while the doctor cleaned and bandaged her arm, her face pale but determined. When the medical attention was finished and they were alone, the full weight of what had happened finally settled between them. They tried to kill you because of me, Dante said, the guilt evident in his voice. They tried to kill me because I have been disrupting their operations for 2 years, Elysia corrected. This was inevitable the moment I chose to honor your mother's request. But it accelerated because you revealed yourself to me. If we had maintained the original arrangement, if you had stayed invisible, if I had stayed invisible, you would have walked into the Kozlov trap next week and died exactly the way they planned. Sometimes exposure is the price of effective protection. She was right. But that did not ease the fundamental shift in their dynamic. For 2 years, she had accepted all the risk while he remained oblivious to the danger. Now they were partners in peril, and he found himself desperate to shield her from consequences of her own courage. The doctor says you should rest, he said, gesturing toward the guest bedroom where fresh clothes and supplies had been prepared. What I should do is coordinate tomorrow night's extraction before the window of opportunity closes, she replied, already reaching for her phone. Dante moved closer, close enough to see the exhaustion she was trying to hide, close enough to notice the way she favored her injured arm despite claiming it was minor. The adrenaline was wearing off, leaving her drained but still focused on everyone except herself. The extraction can wait 12 hours, he said gently. You cannot save anyone if you collapse from exhaustion and blood loss. For a moment, she looked like she might argue. Then the weight of the evening caught up with her, and she nodded reluctantly. 12 hours, she agreed. But then we coordinate the operations together, or I find a way to do it myself. Together, he promised, and meant it completely. As she moved toward the bedroom, Dante realized that protecting Elysia was going to require more than armed guards and safe houses. It was going to require fundamental changes in how his organization operated, what they prioritized, what they were willing to sacrifice for principles larger than profit. His mother had spent her final years building a legacy of protection and redemption. Now that legacy lived in Elysia's hands, and through her, in his own choices about what kind of man he wanted to be. The irony was not lost on him that learning to protect his guardian was teaching him how to become someone worthy of protection himself. The intelligence Elysia provided changed everything. Spread across the dining table of the Malibu safe house, her files revealed a web of criminal activity that went far beyond the Kozlov family's territorial ambitions. For 6 months, they had been building towards something much larger than eliminating one rival crime boss. Viktor Kozlov is not acting independently, Elysia explained, pointing to intercepted communications and financial records. He has been coordinating with families in 3 states, building a coalition specifically designed to dismantle your organization and divide the territory. Dante studied the evidence, recognizing names and faces that represented decades of carefully maintained truces and mutual respect agreements. The scope of the conspiracy was staggering, involving people he had considered allies and neutrals in a war he had not known was being declared. Marcus Chen leaned over the table, his expression grim. "Boss, if these numbers are accurate, they have been moving money and weapons for months. This is not a spontaneous power grab. This is a planned extermination. The assassination attempts, the federal investigation, the surveillance of Elysia, it had all been preparation for a coordinated strike designed to leave no survivors and no loose ends." Dante's mother had saved him from individual threats, but she could not have anticipated the level of organization required to counter this systematic destruction. "How many people know about your mother's network?" he asked Elysia. "Everyone who matters to this operation," she replied honestly. Sophia was not secretive about her humanitarian work with the people who helped her. Safehouse operators, extraction specialists, the women they rescued who later became advocates themselves. The network involves at least 50 active participants. 50 people whose lives would be destroyed if the conspiracy succeeded in eliminating Dante and discovered Elysia's connection to their operations. The mathematics of protection had expanded exponentially beyond keeping one man alive. "We cannot run from this," Dante said, reaching the same conclusion Elysia had already arrived at. "We cannot hide 50 people indefinitely, and we cannot abandon the operations that keep trafficking victims and abused women safe. We have to end the threat permanently, which means we go on the offensive," Marcus said, understanding the implications immediately. Elysia spread additional documents across the table, revealing floor plans and security assessments that demonstrated the depth of her preparation. "I have been developing this contingency for weeks, ever since I realized the scope of what they were planning." The plan was elegant in its complexity and devastating in its thoroughness. Using Dante's resources and Elysia's intelligence network, they would strike simultaneously at 5 locations across 3 states, dismantling the conspiracy before it could fully mobilize while gathering evidence that would ensure legal prosecution of the survivors. "It will require complete coordination," Elysia explained, her fingers tracing routes and timelines on the maps. "One mistake, one delayed communication, and the entire operation collapses. They will have contingency plans we have not discovered. Then we make sure there are no mistakes," Dante replied, already mentally organizing his people and resources for the most ambitious operation his family had ever undertaken. The next 72 hours unfolded with military precision. Dante's organization divided into specialized teams, each targeting a specific component of the conspiracy while maintaining communication through encrypted channels that Elysia monitored from a command center established in the safe house. She refused to remain safely hidden during the active operations. Instead, she coordinated real-time intelligence, tracked police and federal response patterns, and provided tactical support that proved invaluable when unexpected complications arose. When Viktor Kozlov's security proved stronger than anticipated, Elysia rerouted 3 teams to provide additional firepower. When federal agents appeared unexpectedly at one location, she provided advance warning that allowed Dante's people to withdraw before being compromised. When the Miami operation threatened to spill into civilian areas, she coordinated with local police contacts to clear the buildings. For the first time in his life, Dante was fighting alongside someone whose capabilities complemented rather than competed with his own. Elysia's network provided intelligence his organization could never have gathered, while his resources provided muscle her individual efforts could never have marshaled. The operation concluded at dawn on the fourth day with complete success. Viktor Kozlov and 17 conspirators were dead, eliminated in coordinated strikes that left no survivors to retaliate. An additional 23 individuals were in federal custody, arrested based on evidence Alesia had provided to contacts within law enforcement agencies. Most importantly, the threat to the protection network was eliminated entirely. The safe houses remained secure, the upcoming extractions proceeded as scheduled, and the women whose lives depended on Sophia's legacy never knew how close they had come to losing everything. When Dante returned to the Malibu house, he found Alesia on the deck overlooking the Pacific Ocean, her injured arm supported by a sling, but her posture relaxed for the first time since he had known her. The constant tension that had defined her existence for 2 years was finally absent. "It is finished," he said, settling into the chair beside her. "Yes," she replied, her voice carrying a note of profound relief. "Your mother's network is safe, the immediate threats are neutralized, and the promise I made to her has been fulfilled." The finality in her tone made something cold twist in Dante's chest. Fulfilled, as in completed, as in no longer necessary. "What happens now?" he asked, trying to keep his voice neutral despite the emotion building behind the question. Alesia turned to look at him, her expression thoughtful and sad, and something else he could not quite identify. "Now I am free to choose what comes next, instead of being bound by duty to someone who can no longer ask anything of me." The distinction was important, he realized. For 2 years, everything she had done had been in service to Sophia's memory and Dante's protection. She had sacrificed her own desires, her own life, her own future to honor a deathbed promise. But that promise was now complete, which meant she was free to make decisions based on her own wants rather than inherited obligations. "What do you want?" he asked, the question carrying weight beyond its simple words. "I want to visit your mother's grave one more time," she said, not as her guardian honoring a promise, but as someone saying goodbye to a chapter that shaped everything I have become. They drove to Riverside Cemetery in comfortable silence, both lost in thoughts about endings and beginnings and the strange way life sometimes transformed duty into something deeper. The cemetery was peaceful in the morning light, empty except for maintenance workers and the eternal residents who required no visiting hours. At Sophia's grave, Alesia knelt and placed fresh white chrysanthemums in the built-in vase, her movements carrying the same reverence they had always held. But when she spoke, her words were different. "Thank you, Sophia, for saving my life when I was 15 and alone. Thank you for teaching me how to be strong, how to protect others, how to find purpose in service to something larger than myself. Thank you for trusting me with the thing you loved most, and for giving me the chance to discover that protecting him might teach me what it means to be protected in return." Dante felt his throat tighten at the emotion in her voice, the gratitude and love and grief all woven together in a farewell that honored the past while acknowledging the future. "I release myself from the promise I made to you," Alesia continued, her voice steady despite the tears on her cheeks. "Not because I take it lightly, but because it has been fulfilled completely. Your son is safe, your network continues, and the legacy you built will outlive all of us." She stood and turned to face Dante, her expression clear and determined and hopeful. "Now I choose to stay because I love him, not because you asked me to protect him. I choose to build something new with him, not just preserve something you started. I choose partnership over guardianship, future over past, my own heart over inherited duty." The declaration hit Dante with the force of revelation. She was not just releasing herself from Sophia's promise. She was offering herself to him as an equal, as a partner, as a woman choosing love rather than accepting obligation. "I choose you too," he said, the words carrying 2 years of gratitude and growing attraction and deep respect for who she was beyond her role as his protector. "I choose the future we can build together, the good we can do together, the life we can create that honors my mother's memory while being completely our own." When they kissed beside Sophia's grave, it was with the passion of people who had found each other across impossible circumstances and the tenderness of those who understood that love was the greatest protection anyone could offer or receive. 6 months later, they established the Sofia Carvello Foundation, a legitimate organization dedicated to combating human trafficking and providing support for domestic violence survivors. The foundation operated with resources from Dante's increasingly legitimate business empire and intelligence from Elysia's expanded network of contacts across law enforcement and social services. They were married in the garden behind the house where Sophia had grown her famous tomatoes, surrounded by women whose lives the network had saved and men whose loyalty Dante had earned through protection rather than fear. The ceremony was small, private, and completely focused on the commitment they were making to build something beautiful together. Standing at Sophia's grave on their first wedding anniversary, they brought not just flowers but photographs of the women they had helped escape trafficking, the children who had been reunited with protective parents, the families who had been relocated to safety through foundation resources. Your mother's promise became something neither of us expected, Elysia told the marble angel that watched over Sophia's resting place. It became love, partnership, and a shared mission that grows stronger every year. As they walked back to their car, Dante realized that his guardian angel had become something far more valuable. She had become his partner in creating the kind of legacy Sophia would have been proud to see flourishing in her name. The protection continued, but now it flowed both ways, encompassing not just their safety, but their shared commitment to building a world where fewer people needed guardian angels because more people were willing to stand guard over those who could not protect themselves. If you have ever had someone in your life who changed everything just by caring about your well-being, then you understand the power of what Sophia created when she gave Elysia to Dante and Dante to Elysia. Love, it turns out, is the most effective protection any of us can offer each other, and the only guardian angel most of us will ever need. What connections in your own life have shaped who you have become? Sometimes the most powerful bonds are formed not through blood, but through choice, through people who see who we could become and help us get there.